Hello internet, and today's video is going to be a book opinion. Those videos in which I tell you my opinion on a book. This book opinion might come across as a little ranty, I admit that. And we're going to talk about By Your Side by Cassie West. Now I want to start this off by saying I'm not trashing anyone who reads this and enjoys this book. I'm not trashing anyone who loves this book or anything like that. So if you're wanting to be offended by what I'm stating, that's your problem. This is my opinion, hence why I call them opinions. So I could not stand this book. Oh my gosh, getting through this book was so hard for me. I read this one on audiobook, and the audiobook was pretty decent. I liked the voice actor, so that was all good. But it was the content of this book that bothered me. So I thought I was going to be excited. I knew it was just going to be like a short, little sweet contemporary. I knew it wasn't going to like be much. I knew it was probably going to be like a fluff light read, and I have admitted I do like fluff light reads, okay? I own several of them. Some of them are like my favorite like reads to go back to. I don't really care about any book being super intense for me to enjoy it, but this one just had so many idiotic things in it that I couldn't even get to that. I was just like, no, this book is horrible. So first we're going to start off with the premise of this book, or at least what the thought of premise, so what my assumptions were. And I will confess that I usually am really bad at reading synopsises, so this might be wholly my fault, but I'm just going to tell you what I thought. So when I first picked up this book and I heard about it on BookTube a little bit, like when it was about to come out and like what other people were thinking about the synopsis of it, I was thinking, okay, two people get trapped in a library over a long weekend. They're going to fall in love. They're going to like be two book lovers. They're going to be trapped in a library, right? If an author is going to write about people trapped in the library, it's going to have something to do with books and the people in the library and the books involved in the library, and they're probably going to have conversations about books, and it's just going to be like two bookworms fall in love. It's going to be like really sweet. It'll be really adorable. It'll be like relationship goals. I don't know. I was just thinking it was going to be like two book lovers falling in love through the power of books and being trapped in a library. That is not what happened. This book could have taken place in an abandoned Blockbuster for all that the library counted in this. This was just about a girl who stupidly gets trapped in the library, something that is almost impossible, and I'll explain why later, and she falls in love with One Note Bad Boy. So we're gonna give these characters nicknames because that is what I do when I don't care to remember the character's real name. So we're going to call the main female lead Brat, and we're going to call her love interest One Note Bad Boy. So Brat is in the library one evening with a bunch of her friends, and they get told, okay, the library's closing, pack up your stuff, we're gonna be closing in 10 minutes, please leave. She has 10 minutes to get all her stuff together, and she decides in those 10 minutes to lollygag. She finally gets outside. She realizes when she's outside, oh, I have to pee. Now, I'll tell you right now, as a person who works in the library, who often has to close for a library, we give you those 10 minutes so you can get your stuff together and use the restroom within these 10 minutes. So why the hell do you take so long? We tell you ahead of time. Point is, she goes back into the library with like a minute to spare on closing time, and she ends up locked in because she couldn't hold on to her bladder, and there was no available bathrooms at where they were going, and it was going to be a long drive. Her friends abandon her because they're shitty friends, and she doesn't have her phone or any of her stuff because she left it all in the car. And none of the friends called around to check that she was in any of the cars before they left, even though she told them, hey dudes, I'm gonna go over there to the bathroom. So she ends up getting trapped in this library on a long weekend, and no one really knows where she is because they've all abandoned her and no one really cares about this girl. So I'm going to now explain library procedures and why it's nearly impossible to get locked in a library. Now, from the way that this book was written, it takes place in the time it was written. So what did this book come out? 2016, 2015 at the latest? Library procedures and most public building procedures at that time are all public buildings have to have at least one emergency door, right? It's just fire code. I don't know if it's different in other places, but most of the times most places, they ensure, especially in America, that you have at least one emergency exit in your whole building, right? So our library has several. Every single door that exits outside is in fact emergency exit, where we can lock it so that you can't get in, but it's always an option for you to get out. Now, of course, certain doors do have security on them, but that doesn't mean that you cannot get out of these buildings. But this girl gets trapped in a library that doesn't have a single emergency door. All right, that's not what that can't happen. I'm sorry. In public buildings, we put emergency doors there so that you can get in and out. Now, maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe this isn't like a fire code hazard in some states, but I just thought this was a thing we did now, since this had been an issue in the past. So libraries tend to have at least one emergency door. All right, you can always get out. It would have been more believable if they had said, oh, so much snow came down, so like when the girl tried to push open the door, she was blocked by snow. I would have believed that. But instead, I was fed this lie that none of these doors open. Not a single one opened. Not a single one. And they described one of these doors that sounds exactly like a type of door I have on my library. That sounds like emergency door. They're like, oh, it's a bar, a push bar. And I'm like, yeah. That bar should let you out of the library. But no. Apparently this library was built in medieval times, so there's no emergency doors. Okay, fine. Next problem. This girl doesn't have her phone on her. She left it in the car. Whatever. She tries to look around for a phone. She can't find a single goddamn phone in this place. And this is my other problem. Libraries tend to have a front desk, like an open front desk for patrons to come and ask them for questions, whether they want to check out books, how to look up books, where activities are. It's different for every library, but there tends to be like one central locale, sort of open space front desk that's not hiding back in an office, and there is that for a librarian to come and sit at. Now, at this front desk, this help desk, there tends to be a phone. Why? Because people like to call the library on occasion to figure out when hours are, to figure out if books are there, to figure out if events are taking place. They just like to call the library. So we usually have a phone, a working phone at the front desk, so that when people call such and such library, we can be like, hello, this is such and such library. How may I help you? That is what we do at the library. There's usually at least one phone at an open help desk that you can access. This library apparently didn't have one, or it kept it in a safe because she can't find no phone, even though she can find a working television. Now, I would have believed this lie that she couldn't find a phone or a working phone if the power had cut out. But the power had not cut out because they spend most of their time in the library watching TV in the back room and getting nasty stuff out of the refrigerator that is still running because the power's not out. But if you had cut the power out, I would have been like, okay, I understand. You can't really access anything because maybe they have a backup generator, but the phone lines aren't on the backup generator. All right, cool, whatever, fine. Not what I was fed. I was fed that there are no phones in this library, yet a perfectly good TV and refrigerator. Okay. Oh, fine. Now we're gonna get into the actual contents of this book after I've just destroyed the fact that it's impossible for you to get trapped in a library in the case this girl gets trapped, unless you are purposely trying to get yourself in a library, because librarians check. We go around. We make sure there's no one in the freaking bathrooms before we leave. Or at least we're supposed to, right? That is our goal. There are emergency doors. There is at least like one phone available somewhere that you could probably find to call someone. But whatever. Let's get into the story of Brat. So Brat is this girl. She's a part of Popular Gang, right? It's probably why all her friends are shit, because they only care about being popular. And when she gets trapped in this library, she meets One Note Bad Boy. He's like the worst kid at school. He beat up people. He's horrible, right? So when she first meets him, he's like, okay, I did not expect you here. I was just trying to hide from my foster family because they're a bunch of terrible people. So you stay over there, I'll stay over here, we won't bother each other. And she starts making all these assumptions about this dude. Then she decides, oh, I'm cold, I don't have any of my stuff. Dude, let me borrow yours. Except she's not like, hey, can I please have an extra sweater if you have one? She's like, you must give me your extra sweater because I am freezing. So you have to share with me. Give me your phone. Give me this. And she starts acting as if all these things that this kid has that he brought with him because he planned to stay in the library, she is entitled to. Because they're both in the library together. And I'm just thinking, bitch, you ain't entitled to nothing in his bag. He could have a perfectly good working phone and not give it to you. He could have 20 extra sweaters and he wouldn't have to give them to you because you're not entitled to any of his things. But she thinks she is. And then he won't even say anything. And she's like, oh, you're such a bad dude because you're not giving me your sweaters. You're not giving me your phone. And he's like, what? I haven't even said yes or no yet. And she's already like assuming by his pause, because she's acting super entitled, that, oh, he's a horrible person. And she makes all these hypocritical assumptions. The worst part is like he mentioned something and he's like, well, I just assumed you were like a crazy bitch from the popular crowd. And she's like, how dare you assume something about me? But moments ago, she was like, oh yeah, he's really dangerous. I've heard all these rumors about him, so he must like be really dangerous. And I'm not quite sure if like he's lying to me or not because there's so many rumors about him. And I'm like, really? Like he says an obviously thing that's actually pretty true. You are really weird and stuck up, and you are just that typical popular kid most of the time. And then you're making all these assumptions, but you're offended that he assumes you know him. Like, she's the biggest hypocrite. And the thing that made me even more angry about her character is we're supposed to feel empathy for her, and we're supposed to feel bad for her because she has anxiety. She has anxiety so bad that it's clinical anxiety in which she has to take daily medication for because she just gets anxious and severely anxious to the point that she gets panic attacks. So we're supposed to feel empathy for her, but I'm like, outside of her anxiety, she's a brat. She thinks she's self-entitled. She thinks she like can have everything she wants. She thinks everyone should cater to her. And we're supposed to believe that because of like her anxiety, we're supposed to feel bad because, oh, she's trapped in this library. Oh, she can't handle this. She has anxiety. And she's like, oh my gosh, like how could I possibly survive this? And it got to the point where I was like, I cannot feel sorry for you that you have anxiety. I cannot pity you in your situation because you have anxiety. Buck it up. Like, you cannot use your disability in any sense to excuse yourself from common decency. You can't say, oh, I have anxiety, so give me your sweater. You can't say, oh, I have anxiety, so you have to play with me. Otherwise, I'm gonna freak out. You can't just demand things and be like, well, I have anxiety, and try to, like, make that a cripple for yourself and make that a crutch for yourself. And it got to the point in my mind where she was just making it a crutch. There were certain points where I was like, yes, that is an anxiety-inducing moment. I perfectly understand why you are freaking out, why you're having a panic attack. But in daily life, she would just use it as a crutch for everything. Like, she uses one example where she's like, oh, when I go out with my friends, sometimes I have to leave parties early because I have anxiety. And I was like, bitch, I leave party early all the time, and I don't have no anxiety. I mean, I have the average person's level of anxiety. I don't got no clinical anxiety, but I leave parties early all the time. Want to know why? Because I don't like people. I don't like crowds. I don't like talking to strangers that often. So I don't stay at parties that long. And I know several people who feel the same, and they don't have some mental issue or diagnosis that limits them, that tells them, oh yeah. No, I don't have any of that tells me I don't want to be at a party for a long time. I leave early, and sometimes I don't tell anyone except text them later and be like, hey, I left the party, I'm back home in my pajamas watching Stranger Things. Like, that's just a normal thing. And she gets anxious because she's like, oh, my friends think I'm a bitch. They think I'm better than them. They think I'm this horrible person because I always leave parties early. And you find out her friends actually do think that because they're terrible friends. But if she had real friends, she wouldn't have to disclose her mental status. But real friends would have noticed, oh, she does not seem to enjoy parties that often. She seems to get claustrophobic in crowds. She doesn't seem comfortable talking to a bunch of strangers. Real friends would notice that. So if you had to leave early, or if you were like, hey, peace out, or if you were like, hey, can't come today, they would not be offended because they would understand your plight. And you wouldn't have to disclose your mental situation to them for them to understand that, because they're good friends and don't need to judge you all the time. I have plenty of good friends where when I'm like, no, I don't want to go with you, I don't have to explain that there's a reason why. They're just like, oh, okay, this is just one of Chino's days where she doesn't want to deal with a lot of people. Like, what a wild concept! Have good friends! But point is, she just tries to use her anxiety as a crutch so often that when she has like actual anxiety, panic attacks, I'm just like, really? No. And then the bad boy was actually my favorite character, even though he was pretty one-dimensional. Like, we're supposed to hear all his sordid stuff about his past and why he's a tortured soul and why he chooses that the book he wants to read in the library is Hamlet. And we learn all this stuff because he tells us. We don't see it. We don't see any character development from him. Nothing's about him. He's just like a one-dimensional character, and he's actually like my favorite character because he had more personality in his one dimension than she had in all 300 pages of me being stuck in her head. Another thing, okay, so they get out of the library eventually. We know she has really bad anxiety. We find out one of her friends, one of the boys that she was really interested in, her crush, had actually left the party that her horrible friends had. He ended up getting in an accident. She goes to visit in the hospital. She feels really guilty. All of her horrible friends continue to make her feel guilty, even though it's not her fault that she got left behind at the library by her terrible ass friends. Like, they're like, oh, you wanted to get trapped in the library. And she's like, really? Point is, this boy is a little daredevil, right? He's just like, ooh, let me go jump off this cliff real quick. And she has trouble deciding whether or not she wants Daredevil Kid or the safe kid who cares about her opinions, who has shown that he's sensitive and he's willing to work with her through her anxiety, that he's not going to push her to things that she doesn't want to do, or that he's going to try to comfort her if she needs it, right? She wants the Daredevil, so she like has this moment where she's like, which one do I want? Do I want Daredevil or do I want One Note Bad Boy? Oh, how could I choose? And then she goes and visits Daredevil all the time, still thinking, oh yeah, maybe I have feelings for him, maybe I really like him. And every time she talks to him, she's like, yeah, he spikes my anxiety because he's always doing dangerous stunts. I just get so anxious. And then they have a scene where she tries to tell him, no, please don't do that. You're making me uncomfortable. And he's like, oh, whatever. Don't be a baby. Yeah, whatever. And she's like, my anxiety just peaked. And I'm like, really? Really, Brat? You're trying to figure out whether or not you want anxiety-inducing Daredevil or perfectly safe, I care about you, One Note Bad Boy. This is really a conversation we need to have. And yes, I understand you can't just fall in love with someone in a couple of days, and she's known the Daredevil longer than she's known this dude. But I think it's pretty obvious if you have like clinical anxiety and someone is obviously giving you panic attack just by being themselves, they give you anxiety-induced panic attacks, versus the kid who just met, who's like sensitive to your issues, who cares about you. Like, I don't care how long you've been, obviously one is better than the other, right? So, now I'm gonna harp on the library thing again. This library, again, served no purpose. I really would have preferred if they were, like, locked in an abandoned Blockbuster, because no reading goes on. None of these people like books. Like, if she gets trapped in the library, and for an hour, while she's trying to calm herself down, she sings aloud, and then after she's finally calmed herself down, she's like, oh man, I don't have my phone. How will I keep myself entertained? Eyeing a pile of books all around her. And I'm like, really? And then she goes and meets the bad boy. No book is read except maybe 2 pages of Hamlet from the kid who brought the book. One Note Bad Boy brought his own copy of Hamlet, and he read 2 pages because Brad kept interrupting him. And every time he would be like, one rule. leave me alone and let me read, she would be like, your rule is stupid. So actually we're gonna play with these kid toys that I took over there from behind the help desk that has no phone at all, because, you know, that's the kind of library we go to. And we're gonna play with these little kid toys instead. Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. Oh, I actually want to watch TV, so let's go into the back room and go watch Desperate Housewives instead, because we're in the library, so we ain't gonna touch a single one of these books. Yeah. You can see my irritation spiking. I think the most offensive thing to me, which is all the misconceptions about the library and the fact that none of them read a single library book, or even just a book in general. Like, in the course of this whole book, this kid only reads 2 pages of Hamlet. Because at every other point, he doesn't have the book with him. And then when he does have the book, she just keeps bothering him, so he can't read. Like, why would you take this book take place in the library? And then this girl is this stupid, vapid, hypocritical, awful person who thinks she's just like this perfectly sweet, nice girl. She's like, okay, you know the nice guy equivalent, like, oh, girls just don't like nice guys. And girls are like, no, we like nice guys, you're just not a nice guy. That's this girl. She's like, oh, I'm just such a nice girl. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're just a quiet, shy girl, but you ain't nice. Not at all. You're a hypocritical idiot who thinks you're entitled to everything. You're a little butthole. That's who you are. Like, I just could not stand this girl, alright? And all of her friends were trash. Like, every single last one of her friends were a piece of garbage. And I was just like, how do you think these are your friends? They are garbage people. Leave them alone. Go hang out with your new boyfriend. He cares about you. These people don't. And I ended the book and I was like, thank you. Now I have one book that I absolutely hate because it's offensive to all libraries ever. Please instead write a book about people that are abandoned in a Blockbuster. Because I might actually read that one if it was in there. Like, if they got abandoned in a Blockbuster or something by like some weird coincidence and then they pulled all these shenanigans that they did in the library, I would be like, yeah, this book is so good, so entertaining. But the fact that they offended the librarian in me, I was just like, why you do that? Why you do that? What is the purpose of having this in a library? Really, that is my question to you guys. My opinion's over, but my question now is, if you've read this book, what do you think was Cassie West's purpose of putting these characters in a library, since this library served no purpose in the long run of this story? Also, if you've read this book, what are your opinions on it? Did you just find it a small, enjoyable read? Did you kind of get irritated with it too? I'd like to know. I could see like the good points in this book and how it's entertaining, but like I said, I was just really beguiled and angry at a lot of the things that happened in this book that I couldn't take it at the face value of a light, fluffy read. So comment down below, let me know. If you like what you're seeing here, you want to continue to see more, click all those button buttons down below, and goodbye, Internet.